Well, a couple of weeks until we sit again here in Parliament, but Anthony Albanese has done his one reshuffle, we think, unless things go really wrong, of the term. So it doesn't necessarily set up an election soon, but this is his team he will take to the election. Joining me live, Herald Sun political reporter Jade Gailberger and the Australian political reporter Rhiannon Down. Thanks both for your time. Starting on this reshuffle, not huge, but maybe a little bigger than some were suspecting. What did you sort of take out of it, I guess, is the 30-second overview, if you like, Jade?
I feel like it was interesting that Tony Burke, even though he is obviously close to the Prime Minister, was put into that Home Affairs portfolio. Obviously, last week there was a lot of speculation around whether Murray Watt would move into there, and we obviously didn't see that happen. I think it was not surprising that obviously Clare O'Neill and Andrew Giles were moved sideways into different portfolios. That obviously helps address a lot of, I guess, opposition criticism of the government in terms of that.
It's a bit strange because immigration is often the sort of issue, but it's not in cabinet. So it's sort of like it's your fault, but you're not the cabinet minister. It clears that up. It's one person, be across the brief. I guess the question as well is it a reward for Tony Burke because he did well, or did he get the easy run on IR with a friendly Senate and Albanese's like, okay, now cop this one, see if you can sort that out?
It's certainly fair to say it's a little bit of a poisoned chalice, the immigration and home affairs portfolio. You have to be pretty tough, you have to be prepared to be pretty heartless, you have to be prepared to fend off attacks from the coalition and sections of the right that, you know, you've made some mistake on, you know, criminal detainees and whatnot, and certainly Clare O'Neill and Andrew Giles have had plenty of that the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, it's tricky for Labor people because their rank and file don't like being tough, but they need to be tough to win over the broader electorate. Because if you look at Scott Morrison and Peter Dutton, they became Prime Minister and Opposition Leader after it. It's not really the same smell of success for Labor, is it?
No, absolutely not. And I think it was always going to be a tough portfolio for Andrew Giles, obviously talented, same with Clare O'Neill, but at the end of the day, Andrew Giles is a faction left, you know, former human rights, immigration lawyer himself. That was always going to be a pretty tough portfolio. I wonder if with Tony Burke, you know, he's a New South Wales right guy. He's obviously done a really good job with the IR reforms. He's taken on the business lobbies and won. So perhaps Anthony Albanese is thinking he can handle this one.
Yeah, or say, don't fly too close to the sun is the other version of it, I guess, one or the other. Always interesting when you see changes. So housing, out Julie Collins and in Clare O'Neill. I mean, they're not going to say it, but is it a concession that this area for Labor, which should be better for them, hasn't gone that well?
Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, the Greens have been trouncing them, and especially there's a lot of like inner city seats that are definitely of concern at the next election. We've obviously seen, you know, the Greens really like kind of making roads in some of those seats, especially around obviously the conflict overseas. And so this is like a really important area in terms of not only obviously like renters, but the issues around supply, housing affordability, but also some of those like older cohorts where people are trying to be like, are my kids going to be able to afford a home?
Yeah.
So it's kind of that
the generation that has a house is still worried about their kids who can't get one. That's how it's spreading.
Yeah.
And the other thing from that is, if this is the problem, then do we see new policies from it? Because there's so much money Labor's already put into it. Are they going to do new policies? Maybe it's not a spending one. Maybe they do something else that doesn't cost money. But do they need something else to capture the imagination?
Well, certainly I think it's fair to say that a lot of the money that Labor's already poured into housing, like the Housing Australia Future Fund, a lot of that doesn't seem to have made a big hit with the electorate. You've had Max Chancellor Mather at the Greens being very successful in his attacks on Labor for housing. So, I mean, Clare O'Neill, Anthony Albanese said she was a very clear communicator. Maybe those skills will come in handy here to try and reach out to voters a year out from the election.
Maybe there'll be some more media interviews, always welcome on the program. The other big news today, of course, Barnaby Joyce. Now, he's at this community event that was essentially raising concerns in particular about wind power. He had this to say and then an apology of sorts afterwards.
And the bullet you have is that little piece of paper, and it goes in that magazine called The Voting Box, and it's coming up. Get ready to load that magazine. Go, goodbye, Chris. Goodbye, Stephen. Goodbye, Albo.
Okay. Here we go. I apologise for using that metaphor. I've done it on Sunrise. Now tell me Mr. Giles is a good minister again.
Yeah, not overly contrite. What do you make of this? Is this going to be a 1 or 2 day story, or will there be real...
I think so. I mean, I think obviously Barnaby Joyce has come out, he's apologised, the comments were inappropriate. We obviously saw the PM earlier on the show say, you know, this is a real kind of test for Dutton in terms of whether he sacks Barnaby Joyce or not, but Dutton has come out and said, you know, he's apologised, that was the right thing to do. So I think they've obviously not looked to like weigh in on it too much and hope that it kind of dies off.
The other aspect though is the renewables side, because the nuclear policy is something the Nats wanted and it was supposed to sort of achieve a bit of peace around net zero. We need more renewables, regardless of what side you're on to get there. This seems to be the Nats maybe saying the quiet part out loud. He called them wind turds and said they're disgusting. I mean, it sounds pretty ideological language around energy. Labor accused of it on nuclear. This sounds like Barnaby Joyce at least on renewables.
Yeah, I mean, the coalition is in a tricky position here. These wind turbines are quite unpopular. There's a lot of regional communities that are quite concerned by them, offshore and also onshore. Clearly, Barnaby Joyce is trying to play to, you know, regional voters in that respect, but also even the coalition acknowledges that renewable energy is needed as part of its mix, even if its focus is on nuclear power.
Yeah, so if you can debate where it needs to be and say Labor hasn't done the process properly, but from those remarks, it makes it sound like he just doesn't like wind farms, full stop, almost anywhere.
Well, I think there's been a lot of controversy, obviously, over the locations and then in terms of, you know, what kind of transmission is needed to actually get that power to other places. We've seen a lot of times, especially in places like Victoria, where there's obviously a lot of fights from the farmers in regards to where those transmission lines are actually going to go. So this is obviously a really contentious issue, especially for those like Nationals MPs.
And having the debate around the where, I think, probably suits them better than the sort of disparaging the technology in general. Anyway, see where it goes, Jade. Rhiannon, appreciate your time today. Thank you.